In this video, we're going to be taking a look at all the changes that were made to Dormammu and answering the question, is Dormammu good now? Hey guys, Rich from Rich Big Gaming. Hope everyone is doing fantastically well. Welcome to this, another Marvel Crisis Protocol video. And in this video, we are trying to answer the question, is Dormammu good now? I had a couple of you comment on the last Sentinels video that said, hey, we really like this. When's Dormammu coming? I wasn't thinking about doing it, but then I thought, hey, why not? Let's take a look and see if Dormammu is actually good now. Dormammu is a really interesting character. Let's have a look at what he used to look like before. So, you know, big 8-threat character. He's still technically, or he is still the only natural 8 character or 8-threat character in the game. There are 2 other characters that can get to 8-threat, but you've got to add gems to them. That's Thanos and Adam Warlock, but he is the only natural 8-threat character. So let's have a look at what he could do on the board before. This is obviously his old card. So stat-wise, 10 stamina on his front, 12 stamina on his back, medium move, large base, so gets around quite nice. Size 5, he was the first size 5 character in the game that we ever got. As we already mentioned, he's 8 threat, 4 defense, 4 physical defense, 4 energy defense, and 5 mystic defense, as you would expect. So let's take a look then at his attacks and what he could do. So Shadow Bolt, range 4, strength 6, 0 cost, but we can't really call this a builder or a gainer because the only power generation in it was that sap power on a wild. And then we've got incantation of obliteration, range 3, strength 8, cost 5, and it's got a trigger on there, dark miasma, that lets you make the attack again, but we'll get into that in a moment. So how effective is he, right? Because 8 threat, that's a huge amount, right? That can be anywhere from 50% up to, what, I'm trying to work it out now, 50% to like 20%, no, even more, 25% maybe, even more, 30% of your total threat value, depending on whether you're playing 16 all the way up to 20. But an 8 threat character is more, you know, going to make up a big percentage of your overall threat level that you can bring to a game, meaning that, you know, you're generally playing taller with Dormammu than you would do with a 3-threat leader, for example. So Shadow Bolt, what was it doing power-wise, damage-wise even? About 3.4 damage in total. So yes, it's only a 6 dice. I went to go use the word builder then, a 6 dice 0 cost attack. Things that I like it was range 4, which is nice. Master of the Realms of Darkness, if we look at the bottom part of that. Additionally, when calculating successes or failure of this character's attacks, this character adds the number of failures in both the attack and defense roll to its total successes. So you count your own fails, and then you also count your opponent's fails. So if your opponent rolls a fail, that's 1 extra for you, which is, you know, which was quite nice. Hence why he gets up to 3.4 damage. These numbers are always based against the baseline of 3 defense because that's the sort of average across the board. But as we mentioned, it doesn't generate power in his turn, okay? So the only way that he can generate power in his turn is using this attack and getting the sap power, which comes on a wild. Now, to give you an idea, it's about it is a 59.72% chance of hitting that. But there are a couple of prerequisites, right? Like, this is before damage is dealt. So the character that you are attacking needs to already have power to be able to take it from them. Now, it is 1 per wild. I think to roll 2 wilds, then you drop down to about 42%, something like that. But the point here is that whilst the attack overall is okay, it's not a good power generation tool for Dormammu. And that has been one of his problems in the past, is that it becomes very, very difficult for him to generate power. Incantation of Obliteration. So 4.79 damage on total, or in total, sorry. But that Dark Miasma has a 27.78% chance of triggering. Which, just over a quarter of the times you can expect to get this off. And again, with rerolls and other such things, it makes it obviously a little bit easier. But again, there are a few requirements for this, right? It sounds all great being able to get another big spender attack off for free, but prerequisite number one, the character that you are targeting has to be within range 2 of the original target. Now, this doesn't work like something like Captain America's Ricochet on his shield throw, where it can be, I think in that case it's range 3, but where it's a range from the initial target and any range from you, they still need to be within range 3 of Dormammu as well. So Dormammu needs to make sure if he's using this, he's got multiple characters within range 3 and then multiple characters within range 2 of each other. I think the most I've seen somebody get off with this is 3 attacks. And don't get me wrong, 5 power to do 3 attacks that are doing on average, almost 5 damage each is pretty darn good. But the likelihood is 70-something% of the time, it's just going to be that baseline 4.79 damage, and there's nothing else with it, right? There's no other triggers, there's no push, there's no throw at the end of it, there's no place at the end of it or anything like that. It's also worth noting that because you have to measure range 2 from the original target, if they're healthy and you daze them, that's perfectly fine because they're still on the board. If they're on their injured side and you KO them and they're removed off the board, you no longer have a character to be able to measure from. Therefore, you don't get to do the follow-up attack, even if you hit the 1 in 4 of actually getting it. So weirdly, this attack gets worse as the game goes on because there's fewer characters and more of them are injured. So a bit of a strange one. So Dormammu, there's been this sort of conversation in the community for a long, long time that Dormammu hasn't been great. But how do they stack up, right? We've got some other big hitters here, and I wanted to show you some examples and side-by-side comparisons. So Dormammu, obviously we've got his baselines. We've got the basic attack, and then I just picked whatever the biggest spender was for them. So Dormammu, 3.4, 4.79, with that 27% chance of getting an extra one, which is costing 5. Thanos with the reality. Now, reality gem, the reason I put that in there, that just increases Thanos's, what you can do. So just over 3 damage with the reality gem. He doesn't have to throw at the back end of that, though. So that is, something to take into consideration. But it is only a range 2 attack, right? So there's, so Dormammu is doing better damage and at a longer range. Thanos with his spender, it's not really a spender, it's a 0 cost that you can add to. If we add 3 to that, making it an 8 dice, 4.27 damage. Costs 3. There's a push at the back end of it. Adam Warlock, brand new into the game. He also has a 6 dice builder, just over 3. And again, he's got an attack that's I really, really like. It costs 5, does damage, but actually it's all the other things. It's got a throw at the back end of it. You can heal people. You can remove conditions. It's really, really good. Couple of 7 threats. I Hulk is doing about 2.7 damage on his basic attack. And then his spender, 4.37. That costs 5, but again, it's got a throw at the back end of it as well. It's got other triggers in there. Malekith, weirdly, does the most damage in the sort of 7+ category with just over 4. And then his spender, 6.55, but it's got a trigger at the back end of it as well. So in terms of damage output, he's fine, right? His damage output, he's absolutely fine. But we have to remember that the power generation on all of these, Thanos is generating 3 power when he does that. Immortal Hulk is generating between 2 and 3 power when he attacks. Malekith is generating 4 power when he attacks. Dormammu might generate 1 if he's lucky. Okay, so they are able to spend and do more because they're able to generate more power in turn. So if it's not his damage that was the problem, what was the issue? Well, for me, the biggest issue with, and if we look at these characters, Thanos with the reality counts and can explode 1 fail, okay, in his dodge and his defense. Adam Warlock, if you give him the reality, can do the same. Both Thanos and Adam Warlock, beings of immeasurable power, reduce all enemy damage taken by 1. Not to a minimum of 1, by 1. So yes, their health pools aren't as big. Yes, their defenses might not be quite as good, but they've got more going on there. A Warlock can boost defense dice as well by 2. So actually, he can have a better stat line than Dormammu. Hulk, we know Hulk does. He just comes back and back and back. Malekith again can choose to explode failures and include them as well. But the only defensive tech that Dormammu has is Feel the Power of Darkness. So after an attack targeting this character is resolved, it may use this superpower. The attacking character is pushed away from his character's shot and gains the Hex special condition. If it already had Hex, it gains Incinerate. So it means that you're unlikely to double tap Dormammu because he can push you away. But again, his power generation isn't very good. And if we actually look at the next line or the next one down, which is Master of the Realm of Darkness, this is the thing that lets him count failures in his and the defense roll when he's attacking. When this character suffers damage from an enemy effect, it gains 1 power instead of power equal to the damage suffered. Now, the way that they tried to mitigate that was when another allied character is damaged by an enemy effect, or the Flames of Fultine, that's the leadership, where if they have more than 6 power, it's going to do a damage to them. He gains a power. So imagine it being a bit like Ghost Rider, right? So like Ghost Rider, original Ghost Rider, when anyone else is damaged or takes a damage, Dormammu gets a power. But it meant that you could kind of just ignore that and just go for Dormammu. And because he doesn't have any defensive tech, it's just 10 straight stamina, which, okay, is a little hard for the average character to take down. But if you've got a powered up character, they can rip through Dormammu very, very easily. Now, I will say there are a couple of things before we get into Dormammu's card. There are a couple of things that are outside of Dormammu's card that I think have helped him quite significantly. And we spoke about these before in the Sentinels video. First of all, throw damage. Whilst Dormammu still had 4 physical defense, he had no way of being able to boost dice or reduce damage or anything like that. So, a couple of size 4 buildings thrown at him is going to take its toll. And also, he's a size 5 character, so he was also a threat to his own team, because if you could throw a Dormammu around, he could generate a lot of damage for your opponent. So I think those have helped him. I also think now with this new style of extract that we're moving into, whereby they're not all just pick them up and potentially run away with them. Because Dormammu is playing taller, they struggle, right? If you're a Web Warriors and you manage to get an advantage round one, or even the defenders or something like that, advantage round one on picking up extracts, and you're 1 VP up, you know, you scatter to the four corners, and Dormammu and his 2 or 3 buddies don't really know where to go. And remember, you know, his 3 buddies are probably going to be 3 threats, maybe a 4 threat and a 2 threat. But it meant that he couldn't get around the board quick enough, and he couldn't target enough people to be able to do the damage needed to take those extracts back and really have that big round where he can score out and daze a team and things like that, which a lot of tall lists have the ability to be able to do. So I think before we even get into Dormammu's card, I think things that have happened around him have actually made him slightly better anyway, and definitely made him more playable. So that's the old Dormammu. Let's take a look at the new Dormammu. So first thing we'll notice about Dormammu is some really nice new artwork. I do have to say Patrick Brown, for the most part, the cards that he does, and he seems to be doing a lot of these new style cards, is doing a really, really good job. I think the artwork looks really, really good. But baseline stats have remained the same. 4/4/5 defense, 10 stamina, 8 threat, size 5, medium move, and of course they've not changed his base size. First change is going to be with Shadow Bolt. So again, baseline stats of the attack remains the same, but we've changed the trigger. And the trigger has now changed on both the sap power and the hex to be from a wild to a failure. Now, as a percentage wise, it's exactly the same, okay? And as a damage wise, it is exactly the same. So 3.4 damage, because we're not increasing the number of dice, and a 59.72% chance to generate 1 power. The thing I like about this is because they're a failure, it does mean that they're going to stay around. So characters who have the ability to force you to re-roll your dice, for example, well, they could force you to re-roll a wild. They can't force you to re-roll a failure, because you're not turning that failure into something else that can be re-rolled. You effectively just count it as a success. So whilst stats wise, and we'll get onto it in a minute, stats wise nothing has changed. They are actually, he's immune to a few more things now. Murdoch, for example, who, your opponent doesn't count wilds in their successes. Well, it affects Dormammu less now because he's not relying on a wild for that trigger. He's relying on a failure for it. So pretty good there. Slight change to incantation of obliteration. Again, 95% of this is staying exactly the same. So it still has some of the problems that I've mentioned before, but what we have done is we've changed out the requirement for a block to be a wild. So again, percentage chance of getting that is exactly the same, okay? But it does mean that you actually have a success. So, you'd rather have 4 dice that you roll all be successes rather than only 3 of them being successes for the attack. So I do like that. And again, staying exactly the same, 4.79 damage with a 27.78% chance of triggering. So the first, and I would say probably one of the most significant changes, is going to be to Flames of the Faultine. So this is the Dark Dimension leadership. Most of it remains the same. If Dormammu is included in a squad, that squad is affiliated with Dark Dimension. As we already mentioned, he bows to nobody, and you must use this leadership. This character and each other character you control gains 1 additional power during the power phase. That's the big thing that Dormammu does, right? he takes everybody and turns them into Asgardians. And if you look at most characters' cards, often the thing that would be really, really good that they could do turn one, they can't do because they don't have enough power for it. They can't do it off the bat. Whether that's a throw, whether that's a charge, whatever it may be, under Dormammu, they're often able to do it. Now, the second part of that, and the kicker to this was, and it used to be, during the power phase, if another allied character has 6 or more power, it suffers 1 damage. Well, now it's 5 or more power and they suffer 1 damage. And you may say, well, Rich, going from a 6 power threshold down to 5, that's not a good thing. And you are right, or you would be right, if they hadn't changed the phase in which it happened. So it's now been moved from the power phase to the cleanup phase. Now, again, why is this important? Well, I'll give you a scenario, and we had this exact same scenario with Cosmic Cubes. I'm playing Dark Dimension, somebody attacks one of my characters that isn't Dormammu, and leaves them alive on 1 health and full power, right? So they're on 10 power. Could be as little as 5 or 6, but they're on 10 power. So we have the cleanup phase, and then we move to the power phase. They take a damage. They daze. They're not available to use for the rest of that round. And especially in an affiliation like Dark Dimension, we've already mentioned you're going to be playing a lot taller because of that 8 threat from Dormammu. Moving this to the cleanup phase whilst reducing the threshold for when it kicks in means that if you do have a character alive on 1, yes, they're still going to be dazed or KO'd, but in this situation we're talking about dazed. But at the beginning of the next round during the power phase, they're going to come back and then you're going to be able to activate them. It's another body on the board for you to be able to play with. So big change, and I really like this. I think it's I think it increases the viability of Dormammu and of playing Dark Dimension. And again, guys, it's never going to be a silver bullet that just makes them good. It's lots of little things that increases overall. However, whilst I said that is a big thing and one of the biggest, I actually think the biggest change is Master of the Realm of Darkness. Now, once again, this is a 2-part. We love our 2-part innate abilities, but 2-part ability. The first part remains the same. When this character suffers damage from an enemy effect, it gains 1 power instead of power equal to the damage suffered. When another allied character is damaged by an enemy effect or the flames are faulting, this character gains 1 power. So that part remains exactly the same. However, what has changed is, additionally, when attacking at the end of the modify dice step, add 1 failure result to this character's roll for each failure in the defense roll. Now you might be thinking, but Rich, that's exactly the same. We counted, we were including them anyway. Well, let's just break that down and explain why this ever so slight change of wording actually increases a lot of other things for Dormammu. So in the past, what we did was we could count, right? If our opponent rolled a fail, hey, great, we counted that fail, it added towards our number of successes. What we're actually saying now is we're actually effectively taking another dice, and for every failure in our opponent's defense roll, we are adding another failure into our dice pool. So they're now our dice, we control them. Look at Shadow Bolt, the sap power and the hex. So we've gone from actually on, let's just take the sap power part at the moment, in fact, and the hex as well, of having that 59.72% chance of being able to actually make these changes, to be able to generate the power. But there's also a 36.53% chance, and again, that's based on 3 dice. The more dice our opponent rolls, the higher this goes up. But there's also a chance for our opponent to roll a failure as well. And if our opponent rolls a failure, we then get to add another failure into our pool, meaning that we can trigger all of these things, okay? So it helps for the sap power, it helps for the hex, and it also to some extent helps for the dark miasma, right? If we don't roll a fail, but our opponent does, great. Now not only can we count their failure, but we actually don't just count it, we get to add another dice into our dice pool. And that's the big significant difference here, is the fact that, you know, we can do that. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting. It's a mechanic that we haven't really seen before, but I think, you know, in terms of damage output, it's not going to change anything, right? They still remain as they are. In terms of our percentage chance of rolling the failure on a shadow bolt, that still remains the same. But actually, we get an extra pool of dice to be able to try and hit our triggers from as well, which, you know, which does help. It's most definitely a boost to Dormammu. So the last thing that has changed then on Dormammu's card is on that little bottom bit of text. So he's still got flight, he's still got immunity to bleed, incinerate and stagger, but he's now gained the peerless keyword. Now we've seen peerless on 2 other characters so far. We've seen it on Thanos and we've seen it on Adam Warlock. And this is a way for AMG to be able to control the number of big kaiju-like characters being played at the same time. So peerless, this character cannot be part of the same squad as another character with the peerless superpower. So you can take Adam Warlock and Dormammu and Thanos, but you can only ever play one of them at once, which I think is I think makes sense. There are certain characters who you just go, they're never working together, right? So I think that makes sense. And also it's a way of being able to control some of what AMG believe to be the more powerful characters in the game. So we haven't really addressed anything in these changes, haven't really addressed anything that I said before that I thought were the bigger problems. Maybe the power generation, you know, has been addressed a little bit, but we actually haven't addressed anything else in terms of defensive capabilities or anything like that. The other thing that hasn't changed, unfortunately, are Dormammu's cards. Dark Dimension have 2 cards. We've got Dark Empowerment. This is effectively a power generation tool. And then Dark Restoration, which lets you bring somebody back from being KO'd, but they've got to be threat 3 value or less. There's a couple of characters who this works on, particularly characters with Bodyguard, because you can put them in the way. But neither are game, you know, not game breaking, but neither are like, you know, top tier level cards. They're probably not mid tier level cards. So nothing really changed there. They didn't address anything with the defensive side. So we come back to the question, is Dormammu now good? Well, where was Dormammu before? And maybe surprising to some, Dormammu over the past 12 months actually has a 49% win rate. Now, this is on Longshanks, so it's just for events that are on Longshanks, but I think the vast majority of events, especially rated events, are on Longshanks. This isn't just rated, by the way. This is a combination of rated, unrated. It's teams, it's individuals, it's everything. But actually, when you break it down and look at it, it's about 49% across the board, no matter how you filter those out. Now, obviously, somebody with a 49% win rate, you would not count that character or that affiliation as good. Okay, they are below 50%, which means they are, they are at the end of bad, or at the very least not so good. So, will this get them? Should this get them to above a 49% win rate? Well, I would say with those two factors that we take into consideration, both Dormammu's card, and there's no doubt Dormammu is now better than what he was before. Would I have liked Dormammu to have had just something extra, even just counting his own failures on his defense? I think would have been very, very good for him. But based on the fact that we had a 49% win rate before, if those same players are playing those same games with a Dormammu who is now better, then yes, we can expect that would go up. And we would expect it to go up by a couple of percent. So then all of a sudden he's at a 51, 52% win rate. I don't think he's going to get to, 60% or anything crazy like that. But then the other mitigating factor, or the other factor, which is the outside element, which is I think that this new design of extracts works well for him. The games I've played so far, and I actually played another game last night, but using the Sentinels. But we played the two new cards. Don't ask me to remember the names because I can't. And we played at 18 threat, I think it was. And I wanted to try Adam Warlock out. I was running Adam Warlock with the Soulbound, with the Bound Soul Gem and the Reality Gem. So at 18 threat, I had Sentinel Mark IV, Sentinel Prime Mark IV, Cassandra Nova, and Adam Warlock. And we did well. We won. I think these newer newer crisis cards could lend themselves into playing slightly taller, which obviously helps Dormammu. Obviously, the change to throws helps Dormammu. All of a sudden, your opponent doesn't have a 6 damage wrecking ball that they can throw at your characters, or throwing damage, throwing buildings at Dormammu as well. So yeah, overall, that he's going to be better. Now, do I expect him to be amazing? No. As I said, he's not going to... Dark Dimension, and there's not really much they can do in terms of releasing more cards, but what they could do is release tactics cards for them, but I don't think we're going to get, unless they change the ones that we've got already, I don't think we're going to get any new ones, because there are no character packs that are ever going to be released for the Dark Dimension because, well, it's Dormammu. But, I think they're going to be at, I can imagine them being at 51, 52, 50, maybe up to 55% win rate. He adds something very different that other characters can't do. He lets you bring in a different play style for what is effectively very cheap. Realistically, you don't need to bring either of the Dark Dimension cards. You don't need to worry about other characters that you're bringing in. Chances are is that, the other characters you've got as part of your roster, they'll work with Dormammu anyway if you build it in the right way. So if you are in a situation where you go, actually my primary affiliation for this doesn't really work, he offers you a very, very cost-effective alternative to be able to duo affiliate on a roster, because you're not really making much in terms of a tactics cards, and an investment in tactics cards. You might have a spot if you want to bring one or two, one or two of them, but you don't really need to. So I think he's definitely viable. I want to try and play a few games with him to see how he feels. But on paper he's going to be better, and he will be better. He will generate more power, which means he's going to be able to do more of the things that he wants to do. So, is Dormammu now good? I think Dormammu's gone from being subpar to... Let me redefine that. I think Dormammu has gone from being average for good players and subpar for average players. Okay? Obviously, a player with a higher skill cap, with more understanding of the game and everything else, is going to do better with them. Hence why we're getting, this 49%. So now, overall, I think he's going to be sort of middle of the pack for an average player that's coming into the game. And I think that a good player or a great player will be able to get more out of him. But I don't think we're going to sort of look at it and go, Dormammu's great now. He's better. Probably doesn't need any more changes. Again, just counting failures for dodge and for defense would have been great. That could have possibly bumped him up, or would have bumped him up even further. But overall, I think he's now fine. And that's okay. Not every character in the game needs to be absolutely amazing. It just can't happen, because if every character in the game is absolutely amazing, then all the characters are fine, because actually that's now the level that fine is. So yeah, I think he's fine. I think he's going to be above the curve. I think you're going to see him overall win more games than he loses. And again, other people have been dragged down a little bit around him as well. We've got some new, some new characters being released. Who knows, some of those new characters could work really, really well with Dormammu as well, which, we have to always keep that in the back of our mind, that Dormammu has access to every single character in the game, with the exception of Thanos and Adam Warlock at the moment, okay? He can bring anybody that he wants. So what he does lend himself to is and actually let's talk about this, because what he does lend himself to is a very varied play style. Yes, you have to take into account that Dormammu is a big chunk of your threat, but a very varied play style. And now with having to bring more, crisis cards, right? We're bringing 4 more crisis cards per player, so 8 more crisis cards per game. That's a lot more variation that you need to be able to work with. So actually, a character that is able to field anybody that he wants and can bring different characters based on different scenarios and can bring the best of the best, right? It's not like you're playing, I don't know, right? You're playing, you're not playing Web Warriors, but, you want to bring a good stealer. Well, okay, you bring Black Cat, but actually Black Cat is now, she's not in affiliation, so I've got to bring her as a splash character, which means I can't bring this character. Like, there's none of that. So that is something that's definitely in his favour. So every amazing 3-threat or 4-threat that gets brought into the game, imagine them starting each round with 1 extra power and you being able to play any combination of them. And that's what Dormammu offers. So I think overall we're going to see good things from Dormammu. But does that necessarily come from his card and his abilities? A lot of it comes from you being able to take whoever you want, again, with that peerless exception. So we're going to leave it there, guys. Let me know, as always, what you think down in the comment section below. I've been really, really intrigued to hear from anybody who's managed to get some games in yet. As I say, I'm on my Sentinels train at the moment, and I'm really, really enjoying them, but I do intend to play some Dormammu games over the next couple of weeks. Can't play anywhere near the amount of games that I used to play. You know, I used to be able to play probably, I didn't say the number, but somewhere between sort of 15 and 20 games a week. I might get 2 or 3 in now if I'm lucky. But even so, I am going to try and play some Dormammu games just to try him out, especially with some of the new characters that have been revealed, and see how he feels. Guys, do all the usual things. Like, comment, subscribe. It really, really does help the channel. I'm really enjoying MCP, as I've said. I'm really glad to be back. Check out the Discord. There'll be a link down in the description below. If you do want to support us on Patreon, you can do. Again, link down in the description below. Or if you want to check out our sponsor, Leodis Games, there's a link down in the description. I think there's £5 off your first order of over £50 or more. We do have a survey going on at the moment that is going to contribute towards our Christmas special. So if you do want to take part in that, again, I'll leave a link. We do have an event. There's not that many people signed up, I'm going to be honest. So if you are interested in playing an event over December, let me know. I think there's 3 or 4 people at the moment that have signed up. If not, we'll just cancel the event. It's fine, and we'll do something in the new year. Appreciate that we've got Thanksgiving at the moment, and you know we've got Christmas coming up as well. So if not, we'll start again in the new year. But as always, guys, it leaves me with just enough time to say stay well, keep safe, and until next time, bye for now.